Hi everyone, my name is Nate McDorman. I'm a UI programmer working at Obsidian Entertainment. This talk is font sizing out of this world. A little bit about myself. I started Obsidian in 2014. I worked on Tyranny, Pillars of Eternity 1, Pillars of Eternity 2, Pathfinder Adventures, and the Outer Worlds. So this talk is really a post-mortem on the Outer Worlds and its font sizing issue that it shipped with in October of 2019. So as many of you who have already played the game or have heard about it, the Outer Worlds shipped with a pretty small font size as its default setting, and there was no accessibility options for increasing that text size at launch. This was our largest community issue that people had reported when we shipped the game, and I'm going to go a little bit into detail about that. So we had actually known about this issue before we had shipped the actual title. We didn't know how big of an issue it was going to be until we shipped. Now, the test environment at everyone at Obsidian is generally a PC in front of them, about 1 to 2 feet in front of their faces, and that was pretty much it. We did have meeting rooms with TVs set up and a controller hooked up and whatnot, and in those situations, the problem was much easier to see for the developers. Once it shipped, we knew we needed to fix it no matter what the time cost or anything at all. It needed to be fixed in order for people to enjoy the game that we had created. The reason we had not originally done this was because we didn't know how expensive it would be to fix. Our first consideration was doing a post-process material percentage change, and that basically means taking the text size that let's say it's size 15 or something like that, and applying a 10% increase that should go up a pixel and a half. So it would be about 16 and a half, round up to 17 or down to 16, however you want to do it. That material change we assumed was expensive, but we didn't properly evaluate it. That's not the solution we ended up going with. After we shipped, I started messing around with a couple different ways we could try and do it, and I figured why not take advantage of our existing systems. Okay, so here I'm showing the Unreal Engine editor. I know this is going to be difficult to see, so I'm going to try and zoom in and show everyone what I'm actually referring to. Okay, so in the editor, I have a specific text block selected. In Unreal, they have a text widget. We've taken that as a base, changed some of its properties, and made it more custom to work for our needs. And in general, what you need to know is that you can set an Unreal text size for each text block. So we use text styles for that. So over on the right side, this is called body minor. This is just a preset text size that we can just swap around, and anything that uses it will have the same text size. I'll go over here. This is that text size as an editable asset. Its base font size is 15. Now, what I've tried to make this as easy as possible when implementing font scaling was let's just use font size. Instead of doing a material to post-process increase the text size of the way it appears and do all this extra math and whatnot, I figured why not just increase the text size of the text block by however much the user wants to do so. And the way I did it as a test was just adding an actual modifier to the text size itself. So that's the way it's displayed to the user, is it's just a slider from 0 to 10. How I came up with 10, it's just how a good chunk of the game could get before breaking too much of it. And on this right side over here, there's this max font scaling setting. Currently it's set to 9. So basically the default setting for this, because it's an opt-in solution, was 0. If it was 0, it would not change at all when a user would change the font size setting. The maximum value it can have is 10. Anything beyond that, it won't be used. It'll simply just be clamped to 10, and it won't go higher than that. And that's the maximum modifier that the setting would apply to that specific text block. When the setting is changed, all the text blocks in the game are subscribed to that change event, and it'll update the entire game on the fly. It's not a major hitch because it's in the settings, so you're not running the actual game. The game is paused while you were actually doing this, so it wasn't a performance issue at all to worry about that setting changing that on the fly. So the way the actual slider works and it's just adding 0 to a font size. So 15 plus 1 is 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So in the 25th one, it doesn't increase. That means 24. So that would have been 9 pixels. So it's 9 text size increments before I deemed this text block too dangerous or too drastically different functioning to present properly. So what you're looking at right now is the first test case that I got working with this implementation of the setting. I posted this on my Twitter after we announced the setting actually existed as proof of concept. So the first thing I tried doing was just increasing the description of the actual setting description using the setting. Now there was 2 ways I could have gone about doing the actual setting for developers to actually use it. I could have gone for an opt-in or an opt-out system. Basically meaning opt-in, all the text blocks in the game wouldn't use the setting by default until I told it to and gave it a maximum size increase that it could do. The alternative was an opt-out solution, which is every text block in the game would try and use the setting to its maximum potential, and I have to ramp down each text block accordingly per widget. Once I actually got the setting working, we did an opt-in system, and if I had thought about it more, I probably would have opted to do an opt-out system and had every text block in the game use it, and then worry about all the bugs that it caused and fixed it that way. Because I did an opt-in system, there was a lot of UIs that like, oh hey, I've finished font scaling in the game, everything uses it, and then I found later other UIs later on that still didn't use it. So it probably would have been better to do an opt-out system instead, but it's done. The reason I wanted to do an opt-in system because I didn't want the game to break. I wanted to be able to get that setting in and have nothing break and just slowly get each of the existing UIs in the game to work. I needed to be extra careful because the game had already shipped. This was a live product that people already had in their hands, and I know a lot of people needed it, so I needed to work on it quickly, but I needed to work on it carefully. A lot of these changes led me to try and implement little quick changes as well that could help and work nicely with font sizing. So for example, these checkboxes, these setting checkboxes, when I shrink this down, they're very small, very hard to click on, very small in general. I didn't want this massive text size next to this tiny little checkbox. So this is another little custom widget I wrote that just increases the actual presentation of the checkbox so that it would be easier to see and click on. The font sizing being small at ship was not the only problem with things being small in the game. So I tried to go above and beyond and fix as many things as I could after the fact. Even the opacity of the background of the settings thing was too low when we first shipped. We decided to change the colors to make them a little bit higher contrast, darken the backgrounds of a lot of the stuff to no longer show as much of the background as it used to. That was a combined decision before from Art, who wanted the game to look as pretty as possible, and UI, who wanted the game to be functional but still look good. There was a lot of different decisions going on that led to the state that we shipped in. One of the many problems to implementing font sizing like this was a lot of things that just come along with it. For example, this only has so much room before it'll get too long and need to go down an extra line. So, for example, show floating damage text. Here, it's one line, but the way these widgets work is that this text can only go out a little bit further before it needs to wrap. If I increase it all the way, it's now had to wrap into a two-lined setting. So another one of the problems that came to light when I started messing with the font size setting was scroll boxes. So when we don't have a lot of text to show, this is fine. But when we go to showing a lot of text all of a sudden that didn't used to need a scroll box, that's extra code support that needs to go in to actually support that. Our scroll bars don't just inherently work with gamepad support. They needed to actually have some hard code added to make it so that when this widget is visible, the joysticks on the controller actually cause the text to scroll. So I have some debug commands that I've used to change the text on the fly without needing the settings up So you can see the difference between what it used to look like. This is at default font size versus this is at the maximum 10 increase. Not saying this went up 10 pixels, it's what it went up whatever amount I set it to be able to go up. The first update that I did, I took the most important UIs in the game, which was our conversation window, our subtitles, and a couple others very small tweaks. Those were just the first things I could get into before I had implemented the current fix as is. So the first fix I tried was just hard coding a second set of text sizes that we could use if the user had that setting enabled. So basically, if the conversation was default size 18 and the user flipped this setting, let's increase it to 24 or something like that. So that's what I had tried, and that worked to a point, but it was still too local to certain parts of the game and not a global change. So let's talk about what our existing systems actually let us do. So here's another fun one I did. So in the journal, we allow you to select quests, and it changes the text on the right. There's a general quest summary, and then there's individual objectives that you'll have to do below it. And there's a scrolling text bar here, and on some there's a scrolling text bar above as well. On a mouse and keyboard, you're able to just scroll or drag accordingly so you can see all the text. On a gamepad, we try to keep all the text scrollable with the right joystick. So this presented a unique problem here in that if you had two scroll bars visible, what were you going to do? So I got really lucky here in that these scroll bars were able to be vertically aligned right on top of each other, so that it's intuitive to just scroll down on one, and as you finish scrolling, it just pops to the other. So you're able to scroll both scroll bars with the same joystick and see all the text you want. Less than ideal, but a convenient little trick. So I mentioned earlier that we had known this was going to be an issue before we shipped, and that's very true. And the team was aware of it. We just didn't have any severity or real weight to put behind it until we shipped. Once we shipped, it was a must fix, regardless of the cost involved. Because this was a launched game and we needed to be able to ship a patch at any possible time, I did an opt-in solution so that I would manually, this is why it took me 3 months to do it, was because I had to go through every text block in the game and set that max font size modifier accordingly and test out not only in English but in all the languages we had. So what this meant for when we shipped is that often the biggest articles written about the game weren't about the game itself, but the text size involved. People were struggling to enjoy the game with the small text that it had, and it was a common problem for people with no accessibility issues that simply struggled to play the game on a console and a TV at an average distance. It was a real problem. So as I added patches to fix it, I added the first one, and that was well received. It was a good step in the right direction, but it still wasn't enough. So another game that faced this kind of issue was God of War. And here's a Polygon article that they wrote about it, and they ended up shipping a font size patch that did something kind of similar. Polygon used this really cool slider to show before and afters of the changes. So that article that Polygon had written about God of War, so this is the blog that I wrote about font size, so I included that GIF. I did not write this tool. This was written by Caesar, who works at Obsidian and who was very speedy about getting this available to me as a tool for the blogs. So this is just really showing the before and afters. So this is before and after of the same text and how much bigger it becomes and how much more legible it becomes. Our tooltip system. So this is a tooltip at max size. This is that same tooltip, how it shipped. Because of how delicate our tooltips were, I decided not to increase the text size in it at all, but to increase the entire size of the tooltip. It's just scaling the entire widget to be larger and present larger to a user. This has been my talk, Font Sizing Out of This World. I'm Nate. I work for Obsidian Entertainment. If you haven't got a chance to play the game, I highly recommend it, especially now that this accessibility setting is in the game and available to you. If you have any questions from me, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is Nate L. Cabro, NateElCabro, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this.